Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the SmarTech Spotlight, where we highlight some of our partners that we work with in the marketing attribution field. We have today the owner and founder of a really great company out of Portland called Data Speaks. This is Zeke. How do you say your last name, Zeke?
Zeke Camusio.
Camusio. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. So to start off with, we wanted to give you guys the opportunity to kind of come on and represent what it is that you're doing in the attribution and data field. You guys are definitely coming into the market at a right time because, as we all know, the third-party cookies that are going away, how people are changing, how they interact with the internet based on the whole third-party cookies being deprecated in a lot of cases, privacy policies, all that kind of stuff. And so today we're going to talk to Zeke essentially about how you as a business owner can leverage different systems to track attribution. Some of the warnings that you have coming our way as far as the different things that are happening as far as Google Chrome deprecating third-party cookies, Google Analytics changing over so you don't necessarily have all the data you're going to have from the before. And we want to make sure that you as an audience understand kind of the implications of things that are coming your way, because it is going to impact everybody. There is no business out there that won't see an impact from their tracking, their conversion pixels, as far as what's going on. So Zeke, take a quick second, introduce yourself, talk about Data Speaks, and give us an idea as far as your history and how this has all kind of come together.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in digital marketing for 20 years, most of the time in analytics. My background is in economics and statistics, so I naturally gravitated towards the data and making data-driven decisions. And I had an agency from 2007 to 2017, 15, that got acquired in 2015. After that, I started doing some consulting, and one of the things I realized is that brands really struggle figuring out the return on investment they will get from different investments, right? So they will see this number ROAS, this metric was everywhere. They will see a ROAS of 5. They would assume, because it's common sense, that if you invest $1, then you get $5 in sales, and that never happened. Sometimes it was 50 cents, sometimes it was $10. So that was really difficult to work with, because what I found is that for most companies, the cost of goods is the number one cost. The second largest cost is the customer acquisition cost, and the lion's share of that is online ads. So it's a huge problem that, one of the biggest expenses that you have as a business, you actually have no idea what kind of return on investment you're getting. You're having all these expenses and, a pile of revenue at the end of the rainbow, but you don't really know how it got there, So I realized that was a huge issue, and I started looking into it. Even with my background in analytics as a data scientist, I realized that it was really complex. And, I'm sure we'll talk about why it's complex. And but long story short, we realized that was a huge opportunity to help marketers really understand the ROI for every channel and campaign so they could make smart decisions with confidence.
Now, I have to assume that a lot of people who are going to watch this podcast have an idea of what attribution is, have an idea of what tracking is, but there may be some who come across this as just don't know some of the basics about, conversion tracking, ROI, and they're wanting to learn how to do it. And they're like, this is a great podcast for me to learn how to actually track. So for the quick moment, let's just break it down a little bit more granular for the people who need it. So ROAS is return on ad spend. And ROAS, just for you guys who don't necessarily use that a lot, it's essentially, what are you investing in your advertising as a percentage of cost as a whole, right? So we usually look at this as a pretty simple math equation. If you have $100 for your product, and that's the retail price, you can typically justify between 12 to 15% of your cost of marketing into making the cost of acquisition and getting that order through. So if you can spend $12 to make a $100 sale, that's typically going to be a good return on investment. And some businesses that are looking in growth mode, they're going to invest 20%. Some businesses that are really more in scale mode and they really are trying to be hyper profitable are going to be between 12 and 15%. And it really just depends on what your business can afford. I mean, if you have a 30% margin, you may need to be a little more tight with your margins. And honestly, some businesses that we've dealt with, they don't have a big enough margin to be able to even support advertising. Because, as a business owner, I can tell you myself, I have a Turkish towel company. I've talked about this before. And my Turkish towels, when I first got into it, I really got into it to learn about the back end of marketing, right? And I thought, well, as a marketing guy, I've been in this business for 15 years. I can buy a company or buy products and I can sell it online. But then I started realizing that even though I had a pretty okay margin, the margin after shipping wasn't even really enough to justify a $5, $10, or $15 cost of sale. So it's like, you have to really understand what's your cost of doing good, a business, right? What's your cost of goods sold? Yeah. If that cost of goods sold is too high, you may have not purchased correctly in a way that will allow you to actually invest in marketing in the way that we're talking about. And so that's just something to put out there. Not every business is set up to succeed with marketing. And the cost of doing that business, the cost of ads, you have to make sure it's very, very careful. You also need to look at what your average price is and understand, are you trying to make your margin based on one sale, or are you making your margin based on multiple sales? Because a lot of the things that we look at is your lifetime value. A really good example of this is we had a client who sold subscriptions. They had kind of a yoga Netflix that they sold, and their subscription on average was about $10 a month, which averaged about $127 a year. Their average consumer, I think the math on that might be a little wrong, but their average order value was worth $127 per consumer for the first purchase, even though we were only selling a $10 item. If we had tried to come up with our tacos, our total advertising cost of sale, or our ROAS, our return on ad spend, based on that $10, we never would have been able to scale that business up to $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a month that we did. But because we looked at the overall average order value and we said, okay, recognizing how much this client is worth to us in the long run, how much can we afford to acquire that client? And at the time, it was roughly around, I don't know the exact number, but I think it was around $25 to $30 cost per acquisition of a new client. So we spend $30, we get a new client who over the next 2 years will be worth $127 to us. So you really got to think about it, right? So Zeke, when you talk to business owners about this kind of approach, going back to basics, how do you usually talk to them to help them understand what a good margin is, what a good tacos is, what a good, ROAS is, and help them understand from a profitability standpoint, what they can really afford in the marketing realm to be able to make sure that they're not just spending money to make money, but they're actually making profit off of what they're spending.
Yeah, so there are a lot of layers to that. We start having that conversation that you just mentioned in terms of understanding the value of each customer, and you also need to. There's a couple of subtleties that come with that. So what's the value at month 1, at month 12, at month 24, right? Because that increases over time. How quickly do you need to make your money back? I work with a few clients that lose money for the first year, but then over time they keep customers for 5 years, so they end up making a lot of money. That would it's a cash flow intensive activity to be well funded to do that kind of stuff, but it's highly profitable if you do it right and if you know your numbers. You also have to take into consideration that you have many different customer segments and they all have different values. So maybe one segment is worth $500, another one $250. So you really need to understand that. And once you have that information, what I always say is that there's no right or wrong strategy. The most important thing with strategy is to be cohesive. So you don't want to be, take Southwest for example. They're a low cost airline. And they're consistent with that, and that's why they're so successful. They can go one way one day and then the next day, they just, give everybody caviar. It's just that it doesn't fit their business model. So
exactly.
What I rather than making a blank recommendation in terms of, this is what you need your ROAS to be or your A cost to be. What we talk about is different scenarios, because it really comes down to this, for every dollar of revenue that you get, right out of the bat, as you said, you have the cost of good, you have, discounts. That's another one that people don't usually think about.
Right.
So you have your
If you're
prices,
offering 10%
sometimes you
promotion.
offer discounts, right? So
Yeah.
if you have a 10% discount rate, you really get 90 cents for every dollar gross revenue. And then you have processing fees. If you sell on Amazon, you have like Amazon fees, which could be 15%. You have your cost of good, which could be 20%, 15%. So it's like, how much do you have left, right? So let's say that after all that, you have 50 cents for every revenue dollar that you receive. Then you have fixed expenses, right? Like, let's say that you have $500 of fixed expenses, and then you have 50 cents of contribution to the bottom line for every dollar that you sell. So it really means that you have to sell 1,000 units just to pay for those fixed expenses. So that's part of the initial conversation. So when you have those, 50 cents to play with, you can scale really fast by allocating as much as possible to that to ads, or you can scale very slowly and maybe it's a cash cow and you're trying to be as profitable as you can. You don't really care about reinvesting in the business as much,
Right.
So it really has and because there's capital implications and strategic implications, it really is a deeper conversation with different scenarios that have to be comprehensive and take into account lifetime value, cost, revenue, and so
on. 100%. Yeah. And another example of just kind of what Zeke and I are talking about for you guys. So I'll give you two scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really getting into this because I feel like it's going to make a lot more sense once we start getting into kind of the numbers that you guys look at and the numbers we look at, frankly. Let me give you two examples. So we have one client that is looking at profitability as their primary focus, right? So they tell us, okay, we know that our average order value is $127. And we are looking to make a 4, 5, 6x return. So what does that mean? That means for every dollar they invest in advertising, they want to make $6 back, right? And that can be very, very challenging. Typically, when we're looking at things like Amazon, you're going to be looking at maybe a $3, ROAS or a 3-to-1 ratio. So you invest $1, you get $3 back on Amazon. That's pretty common. Facebook, if you have really good creative, you could be looking at a 5, 6, 7x ratio. But we typically recognize that like branded search is going to have the highest return on ad spend. So if you have a good solid brand, one that's been around for a while, that brand equity, right, we call it, will help fund your non-brand efforts from a profitability standpoint. So a really good example, we have a client where their brand regularly gets a 9 to 10 ROAS. So every dollar we invest in branded search, we get $10 made back, right? But we have to borrow some of that $10 to invest in non-brand, because non-brand generally is not going to convert at the same speed as a branded campaign. So you have to take a look at that and go, okay, if I know that my brand is bringing a 10x and I may possibly break even on non-brand or maybe a 2x and double my money, then my overall average is an 8. Right? Yes, non-brand didn't do an 8. It did 2, but brand kind of supported that. So you kind of have to rob Peter to pay Paul, or borrow from your brand equity to fund your non-branded efforts. And that is a good example of a profitability focused growth pattern. The second example is the Purple Mattress model. And I have this information from I cannot disclose the director or the person who gave me this information, but Purple has the founder of Purple was interviewed. And he had a very clear statement that he made. He said, I would like to invest $1 million every month in YouTube. And all I want to make back is $1 million. So of the $1 million I invest in YouTube per month, I want to make that $1 million back and reinvest the next month. That is not profitable. That's a 1x, right? You invest $1 million, make $1 million. However, Purple invested in really, really good creative prior to spending that money on YouTube. So the creative was done well enough to where that $1 million investment made them not only back their investment, but it also gave them brand equity. It gave them a brand that people could recognize. It gave them top of mind awareness. When you thought about mattresses, you thought about Purple. It also got them where mattress stores were getting calls from people saying, we want a Purple mattress. Do you have one? So now they've built a name for themselves where retailers are calling them and saying, hey, we keep getting calls for your product. We don't know who you are, but we want to serve your product in our store. So that $1 million that they invested was not profitable immediately. It was not a direct return, right? It was a 1-to-1 or maybe even a little bit less if you consider the cost of the $300,000 or $400,000 video. The Goldilocks and the Three Bears commercial they created was like a $300,000 video at the time. So maybe if you detract that, they actually were under in their investment. But that investment gave them the brand credibility to scale and to create demand, right? So you have to look at your business model and understand if you don't have a brand, you have to create demand. If you have a brand, you can leverage and borrow from that brand in order to reinvest in your non-brand and create the demand. But somewhere in this pipeline, you have to create demand. It's not going to create itself. People aren't just going to hear about you, right? So you have to think about your financial model and understand which of those two samples or examples are you. Are you a scaling company looking for profitability right away? And every dollar has to support $2 to $3 more that gets reinvested? Or are you a brand that has the pocketbook behind you and the funding behind you to be able to invest in making a name for yourself and really making it big? So those two examples, I think, are going to be really, really important, especially when it comes to ROAS, the 1 to 5, 1 to 4 ratios. It's convoluted, it's confusing, but that's good bare bones basics that I think are going to be needed to understand the rest of this conversation. Anything you want to add to that before we move on to kind of the challenge that we're going to be facing here soon?
Yeah, I have two comments about that. One is that you're right. I mean, there's kind of the invisible value that you get for every dollar that you get in revenue. So as you said, if it costs me $100 to acquire a customer that spends $100, assuming it's a free product, right? Like I just break even, make no money, lose no money. Assuming I have a good product, that person is going to go tell their friends, and it's going to post online, might come back and purchase again. So there's even at a break even, there's always future revenue for every dollar of revenue that you receive today. That's number one. And the second one is that I think that there's one of the challenges or one of the strategic decisions that I see a lot of businesses struggle with is that there's a difference between profit margin and total profit. And usually you have to pick which one is more important. So the example that I normally give is, would you rather have 10% of an ocean or 50% of a lake? 50% is more than 10%, but 10% of an ocean is significantly much more water. So the reason why I say this is that you are going to have, let's say, the highest return on investment, let's say a ROAS of 10, with your customers, people who already purchased before. You run retargeting ads, going back again. I mean, that's always going to be your best.
Your email campaigns.
Yeah, exactly, right. So you have a really high return, but it's a very small value, right? So now let's say that you go a little bit outwards. You do an audience of people that visit your website, so that's going to have a ROAS of 5. And then, but it's much larger pool. And then you go out there and you start using a broad targeting on Meta, for example. Maybe you get a ROAS of 4. Now, as you go out, like the average is going to come down, for the total, but for the margin, for the total amount of profit that how much money you have left in the bank at the end of the month, that's actually going to increase, right? So if somebody tells me, for example, I need to get a ROAS of 6, it has to be 6. I would want to understand why they have that request, because there might be an opportunity, a media buy that has a ROAS of 5, and yes, it will bring your average down. But if in addition to getting the ROAS of 6 you're getting now, we could also go give somebody $1 and give you $5 back, why would you not want that? So I think that a lot of the work I do personally is challenging some of these assumptions, and sometimes there's good rationale in place for why they were made. But sometimes we need to revisit decisions that were made a while back, and maybe they didn't have enough context or enough insight to make those calls.
No, very true. All right. So we're looking at 20 minutes in. We have a lot to cover. So we've covered a lot of the good barrier basics. And I think this is good and important for people who are trying to watch this and understand, like, I want to get something out of this, right? The reason for this discussion, one of the main reasons, we're going to talk about the third-party cookie apocalypse, what's coming, what you should be aware of and mindful of. We're going to talk about the solutions for how we should go about this, including enhancing commerce, the conversion API, as well as looking at what it is we can do from a marketing attribution standpoint in a post-cookie world, and kind of how data speaks their services and what their attribution system does to help you fully understand how you're actually profiting. And then we're going to go into a baseline of understanding the data attribution, the data-driven model, and understanding what that looks like for you. Is last touch the right touch? Data-driven, impact? What does that look like? So we're going to have a fair amount of content here, so hopefully you stick around and enjoy the content. Zeke is brilliant, one of the brightest data scientists I've ever worked with, and we do work together on a very, very consistent basis on multiple clients, and we've seen his strategies come into play and show some really great results. So stick around. I know this is a long podcast, but I think you're going to really enjoy it. So let's get into the meat and potatoes. This is probably the clickbait that got you to click on this video to begin with, right? The apocalypse is coming. The cookie apocalypse is what I'm talking about. So what does this mean? So the cookies are essentially a tracking pixel on your browser that helps the internet function. So when you go to a website, Google has a pixel that says this consumer is looking at shoes. But they also were looking at athletic wear, and they were looking at a gym membership. So they're then creating a profile on the consumer that says consumer XY124. They don't know your name. They don't look at it at a PII standpoint, but they do understand it from a user ID. They say the user X1245 is a athletic consumer looking for a gym who might be interested in health food. They might be interested in potentially a good dog park to take their dog to. They could be interested in a treadmill. Hey, how about those adjustable weights? So this consumer profile that's being created on you is being created by third-party cookies, which is essentially a way for Google to recognize, analyze, and create demographics and socioeconomic graphics that look at your specific buying profile and match you to other users out there. I'm missing the name for what the actual demographic terminology is. Sociographics, or you probably know what I'm talking about. But there is a element there that Google is looking at to put in front of advertisers. So they know that Zeke, it happens to be really, really big into Jenga. He loves Jenga. It's his favorite thing ever. So we're going to show him different versions of Jenga Monopoly, Jenga, for the colorblind. We're going to show him every Jenga possible because we know that's one of his interests. Well, that's what third-party cookies allow the advertiser to do. It's personalized advertising. And I always joke with people when they complain about, the privacy stuff. Do you, as a consumer, want to get served ads from adult diapers? No. Right? I'm 40. I don't need adult diapers. I'm not in that area of my life yet, and I don't need to be seeing ads for adult diapers. What personalized advertising and third-party cookies do, make it to where you see things that you actually like. So best example, I'm a huge gamer. BioShock was a game I played for a long time. And my wife is a big anime person, so we watch My Neighbor Totoro all the time. And one day on Facebook, there was a shirt that was a BioShock and My Neighbor Totoro mashup. I was sold. I bought it immediately. Wow. And that was back in the day before Facebook had to kind of pull their sales a little bit. Like, they actually were full bore. And they were targeting, and they had one of the best targeting engines out there. But this was before all the election stuff and everything that happened. So now they've had to kind of neuter what it is they can actually use as their demographic data. And third-party cookies have a big play in that. Back in 2014, or sorry, iOS 14, not 2014, but probably closer to 2022, Apple iOS 14 actually stopped Facebook from being able to collect cookies from the app, because it wasn't considered a first-party cookie. It was considered a third-party cookie. So the only way Facebook could collect data was at a first-party cookie level. What does that mean? So first party is voluntary. It's I'm a business owner. I'm going to give you this information that I own so you can take action on it. A third party cookie is the system grabbing the information and saying mine right as you're getting it. So the example I use with my clients when I'm doing teachings is this. You go through a purchase. At the end of the purchase cycle, right at the shopping cart, you go to enter your information. I'm John Smith, and I live in Narnia, and I have this phone number. Well, it used to be that Facebook, Google, all the different systems, their pixels on the website would come in and snap up that data. It would just grab it right out of the inbox. And they would use that data to match which ad you clicked on. And then that ad would get the appropriate traffic, attribution, and value. And back in the day, they could go down to the pinpoint. They could say, all right, this purchase happened. This is the amount. This is when you purchased. This is when you clicked. This is the 6 clicks you made in between your purchase. And we're going to track that entire journey in a full funnel. The third-party cookie apocalypse means that those third-party cookies that allowed that to happen, that grab that comes in to grab it, is being completely blocked. Google, Chrome, Safari, they're all saying, nope, we can't go in and grab that information. So what's happening here is the systems are now saying, you business owner, Mr. Shopify website owner, you need to voluntarily give us their email and phone number back as a hashed protected data source. And then we're going to use that hash protected data source to match that user with the login that went in and logged into Google and made a purchase. And the only way we know that that person made a purchase is because you voluntarily gave us that information in a hashed protected format. Mm-hmm. So what's happening now is that you're currently set up in a way where 1% of your cookie browsers or your browser cookies have been deprecated. So if you think about it, that means out of 10 sales happening on your website, right now, 1 out of all 10 are invisible to you. They're not able to be tracked. That means your Google Analytics didn't see it. That means your Google ad account didn't see it. Your Facebook account didn't see it. Your Shopify saw it. Shopify totally took credit for it. But because of the tracking elements, those other systems, it was invisible to them. So those 10 sales still happened. Once third-party cookies are gone, if you do not have the first-party data, the conversion API or the enhanced conversion set up, you will no longer have the ability to send that data back into Google, which means out of 10 conversions, you're only going to see credit for maybe 5. If you're lucky, maybe 7, because those users had already allowed for cookies and everything. So this is a big deal, because if you don't recognize that your conversion rate when you are missing 1 sale is only a 3%, when you're missing half to 30% of your sales when it comes to attribution, you're not going to have any idea what your conversion rate is. You're going to start seeing your conversion rates go like this. And we are seeing this happen in real time. So I've said a lot. Zeke, I want to make sure you get a chance to speak into this because you are one of the experts when it comes to this stuff. Give me some information as far as what you're seeing from the third-party cookie apocalypse, how you're foreseeing it impacting business owners, and kind of at a baseline, before we get into the real nitty-gritty and depth of it, what do you see being the biggest challenge?
Yeah, so I think it's important to be proactive, as you said. What I've seen is a little bit even like more pessimistic than that. You're probably missing 2 or 3 conversions right in the platform, and it might be down to like 2 or 3 out of 10.
Really?
Well, yeah, I expect it to be that bad because there's so many layers. You have the devices themselves, you have the browsers you use, you have the whether or not you have like an ad blocker extension. I mean, there's a lot of things that could be tried on that. And it's really important for your custom audiences to send that information back to the platforms. Like that feedback loop needs to exist for the platforms to understand who these custom audiences are, right? So there are 2 components or 2 functions that pixels have, and one of them is to allow you, the advertisers, to understand the conversion, right? And even if that worked flawlessly, it's never a reliable way for you to understand the return on investment you're getting. So even if you can track 100% of your conversions, you for example, if it tells you got your 100 sales, it's very likely that Google also touched some of those sales, and YouTube, and then you have TikTok. So you have multiple channels fighting for the same sale. And there's also people that were going to purchase anyway. They just went to Google and they searched for your brand. They happened to click in an ad, but if you hadn't been there, maybe some of them would have clicked on organic search. So the example that I normally give is like if you have, if the channel takes you from 80 sales a day to 200 sales a day, that's 20 incremental sales. Even if 50 of those people saw your ad, the platform will tell you that they got you 50 sales, and you have multiple platforms claiming credit for the same sales. So that really matters in terms of helping you understand the actual return on investment. That's never going to help. But the real issue with this third-party cookies going away is the inability you have to send that information back to the platforms. So even though the conversion data is the aggregated conversion data is not really accurate, knowing that you as a user clicked here and added to cart and didn't purchase allows you to create an audience based on those criteria. So
very valuable audience too.
Yeah,
a very valuable audience.
Yeah, and then create lookalike audiences based on that. So not only I want to target these people, but also go look for more people like them.
Yep.
That's really important.
Well, it also educates the algorithm. I think to your point, if it doesn't come back into the platform, that means that the API, the algorithm that Google or Bing or Facebook are using to educate, their models don't get the data they need, and they now start making different decisions because they're not seeing the full picture.
Yeah, the flip side to that is that tracking is expected to be equally inaccurate for the entire platform. So if it's getting only 30% of the sales, it's getting 30% of the sales for each campaign, ad set, ad. So it's going to show that everything is working worse than it actually is. So you could still use that data to see, for example, if a video ad is doing better than a picture ad. What you can see is the actual impact that each one is having.
Yeah.
So that's where it's just becoming more and more important to play by the rules. Understand that we live in a privacy-friendly world, that users are doing whatever they can to not be tracked individually, and for us as advertisers to really understand, how to pass this information in a way that is compliant, and it allows you to deliver that personalized experience to your consumers, without breaking any rules.
Yeah. So one of the common questions I get a lot is, why is Google taking such drastic measures when GDPR doesn't impact the US?
I have a conspiracy theory if you want to
bring it.
Well, I mean, Google Chrome is the largest browser in the world in terms of number of users, and Google is also like one of the largest ad platforms in the world. So if they remove that ability for all platforms and they have their own way of creating audiences based on their own technology, it's like, why not kind of like make the users happy, but really at the same time remove your competitor's ability to track users, in which is, as you pointed out, where Meta was extremely effective, right? So Meta doesn't happen to have a browser, so Google really cornered the market, and likely for us advertisers, we were given a notice that this is going to happen, so we, right now we don't have as much time, depending on when you listen to this, right? But late 2024, early 2025, it's gonna be bad, and it's already getting worse and worse. So why wait until the last minute? You really need to be proactive.
And the other thing that a lot of people wonder with that same question is, with Google Analytics GA4, like, why did Google screw up so badly and bring out GA4? Google Analytics was working just fine. So I can tell you, as a veteran in GA and GA4, there's a lot of PII brought into Google Analytics that should not be there. I have worked with multiple different businesses where we have helped to discover that they were passing information like PII, name, phone number, email, through UTM parameters. So it would go from one system to another system using UTM parameters. Maybe inadvertently, they didn't realize what they were doing. The developers just didn't know any better. And so they were trying to pass, system from one form to a CRM, from a form to a database. But that was constant. We saw that in a lot of different industries where we actually had to go back and say, hey, you're not being compliant. Even with Google GAUA, you weren't supposed to put PII in the system, right? Yeah. And I've seen it. I've consulted on it. I've advised on how to get rid of it. And it is something where you look through, 100 GA4, GAU3 UA accounts, you're going to find your URL path with names and addresses and emails in them for, I don't want to say a specific number, but I saw a lot of them where there was that data being passed along. And so it's one of those things where if you look at it from a compliance standpoint, Google Analytics was not compliant for the PII restrictions that you have for GDPR. And in order to get rid of all that in time, they had to go in and scrap the entirety of how they were using Google Analytics, because there's a ton of information in those servers that are not compliant. And if they get audited, they're going to find it. So that's why you guys should expect. And we actually just got an email yesterday saying that Google Analytics UA is being deprecated completely by, I think the 1st of July or the end of July, one of the two. And they're expecting that to be not only deprecated, but wiped clean before the end of the year. So if you don't have your data backed up yet, you should talk to me, because I have solutions to help you back up your data from GAUA and store it. But I'm telling you, that data is from Google's standpoint, from a compliance standpoint, it's compromised, right? So Google had to make efforts because, one, their tracking was going away. The liability was way too high with all that PII in their warehousing in their systems. And overall, they weren't compliant with a cookieless world. That cookieless world just wasn't a thing. Yeah. So we talked a lot about technical stuff and all this kind of stuff. From a basic standpoint, what is the impact on business owners, in your opinion? How are business owners going to feel this? Like, what if they don't take action? What is it going to look like, in your opinion? And I can add my own opinion too, but I want to hear kind of what you have to say.
Yeah, you just don't notice that your advertising becomes less and less effective. You have to rely much more on algorithms guessing than you being able to guide them by communicating audiences and conversions. That's really the biggest issue. In terms of understanding ROI or ROAS, whatever we want to call it, that was never the right tool to measure that. Neither is Google Analytics, so I'm not too concerned about that. I think that Google Analytics I love it. I actually really like GA4. Is definitely not as user friendly. The interface is not as intuitive as the previous one. But in terms of the tracking capabilities, is really powerful. It does need a little more configuration to get everything. Rather than the other one where you just get most of it just right out of the box. But it is more powerful. It does have more flexibility. It does have more ability to create custom events and customize reports and all that. But what we need to understand is that that's it. It has a specific job, which is to track website activity. Where people come from, what pages they click on. That's it. It can help you understand the user journey. It can help you make investment decisions. It can help you understand who your users are. So it's very good at the one thing it does, and it should be a part of every company's arsenal, whether you're B2C, B2B. But in terms of the being able to collect first party data yourself, if you're serious about advertising online, you have to do it. If you're investing, tens of thousands of dollars a month, 100,000 or more, it's just like going to cost you a significant amount, because you're going to be significantly less efficient. Your competitors are going to get more conversions for a lower cost per conversion. It's just going to run you out of the market.
Yep. So let's talk about a couple quick things, and then I want to move into kind of how you guys are solving this problem with your software. Yeah. So first off, the apocalypse will be coming. Google is saying that it will start with 1% of cookies being deprecated Q1. So we've already seen the first part of the impact. It'll be ramping up to 100% by Q3 2024. So that means that, Q3 is not that far out. We're right on the corner. So if you guys aren't aware of this yet, if this is new information to you, that you need to get on this. So here's some basics of how you can get on this. And if you have questions about this, contact me, Bryan at smarttech.company with 1T. We can talk about enhanced conversions. We can talk about conversion API. But the blunt, simple fact is this. If you're a lead gen site, you're typically going to have your contact information on a form. That form needs to have a JavaScript variable where Google can recognize either the email, phone number, and the name of that user. And then you go into your settings in Google Analytics. You opt in to pass through that user data. In Google Tag Manager, you have to set up the variable that you want to pass through, or you can set up in Google Ads to automatically detect this. It will look at the variable, the JavaScript, and it'll try to figure out, based on your JavaScript, what the email, phone number, and everything is. All you have to do is turn it on. However, there's a lot of businesses that I've worked with that we've had problems with where they don't have a thank you page from an order form that has those data variables set in play. And Google can't read an iframe. So it has to be code on your thank you page, essentially, with those databases, those data points. So Google can grab the information, phone number, email, and name, pass that back into Google, and then they'll hash the data using a privacy hashing technology that makes it to where it's safe. It sits in the servers. It doesn't have any PII. But you have to get that set up on your thank you page. If you don't have that set up on your thank you page, Google won't be able to find it. The other option is through data layers. So I work with a lot of businesses who have WordPress. We oftentimes will use a tool called Google Tag Manager for WordPress. It creates data layer variables, which are essentially a tag, if you will, that is in the back of the code. And then in the tag of the code, it's we will go in there and say this little tag here means email. This tag here means phone number. This tag means name. Grab that information, pass it back to Google. And we'll literally in Tag Manager go in and apply that variable as what the variable is that needs to be passed back through. And that is one of the easiest ways to do that. If you don't have WooCommerce, if you have like Shopify, for example, there's ways to do it in Shopify. Your developer should have an idea of how data layer variables work. If they don't, definitely contact someone that is knowledgeable of the space and let them know. The second one is Facebook's conversion API. The conversion API essentially is the same thing as the enhanced conversions. It is giving Facebook an opportunity to pass that web browser session, the PII, the sale that happened, back into Facebook. The difference is inside of Tag Manager, you need to set up a separate server that hosts and stores that information so that it can pull that first party data back into Facebook as part of an API pull from a private server. Facebook's conversion API is definitely the more complicated version. I have developers that I work with SmarTech that I will leverage for this because it does take a little bit of knowledge of Google Cloud Services. It takes a little bit of knowledge of setting up the server and how to get those data points in play. I would forecast 5 to 6 hours of development time to get the conversion API set up. But if you don't do it, you're going to start having your Facebook performance start dwindling and dwindling and dwindling. And you're going to look back in this and go, man, I should have listened to that Bryan and Zeke guy and got our stuff set up so we can actually track this stuff. Our tracking is not working. What happened? Well, Bryan and Zeke told us it's going to be bad. So if you're starting to see that your average cost per conversion, was $10 and now it's going closer to 70, you may not have your enhanced conversion set up. And so you're going to want to be very mindful about what this looks like. And as a small business owner, you're an IT developer, you're a marketer, you're a staffer, you're a HR person. This is not stuff you're going to want to have to do. So this is going to get complicated quickly. And I think as a consumer, it's going to be challenging for the average consumer to keep up. This has been, I've been screaming this from the rooftops in every single podcast that this is happening. It's going to happen sooner than you like it. And most small business owners aren't prepared for it, to be honest. So that's the lesson for today of what you should be aware of. And I want to talk about DataSpeaks because DataSpeaks is a completely different monster. And I want to swear here for a moment, Zeke, and I apologize for cursing in your presence. Triple whale is a service that a lot of people are being advertised and they're spamming your Facebook. ROAS is another one where this fancy looking guy is talking about how he's going to get your money, get you more money for your ads, or it's free. And he's super excited. He's super, obnoxious. And you can tell the guy is just full of shit. Those are two companies that have kind of taken a similar direction in the fact that they said, hey, we need to create a model that looks at actual attribution and not what your platform says. Because Zeke's really oftentimes says, okay, Facebook sees user 12345 that made a sale, but Google took credit for it, Facebook took credit for it, and so did Twitter. So your ads in your ad reporting says you had 3 sales, but your Shopify says you have 1, right? Yeah. These attribution systems, and I'll say I've used these other competitors, and their systems are nowhere near as sophisticated as the models that Zeke puts together and his system puts together. And you'll be shocked at just the overall source of truth when you see a sale come in and you have 3 that got credited on all 3 platforms, and Zeke's system saying, actually, that was worth 1. Google should have gotten most of the credit, and Facebook's taking credit because it's trying to over-report. And we see that all the time. So setting you up with the best setup ever. Tell us about DataSpeaks. What is it to live in a post-cookie world, and how should people understand marketing in the post-cookie world, recognizing what it's going to be when you can't trust your Google Pixel anymore? You can't trust your Facebook Pixel. It's a source of truth, but it's not the source of truth anymore. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, of course. So we coined this term called impact-based attribution. What that really means is, coming from a background of economics, like one of my favorite subjects was causal inference and econometrics, which is the cause and effect relationship. So just because 2 things are correlated doesn't mean that A causes B. So going back to the example we talked about, if you start running ads on a given channel that gets your sales from 80 to 100 a day, it doesn't matter that 50 people saw your ad. That produced 20 incremental sales. So that's what causal inference is looking at the incrementality of the dependent variable of on the independent variable. So as you increase the spend on a given channel, what happens to your sales. So that's really what you want to know, is like, if I invest this much in a given channel, what return am I going to get? I don't care how many people saw the ad. I just want to know what my return is going to be. So that's what impact-based attribution is. I'll say that there are probably 5 to 10 really great companies that do this in the world. We're one of them. And I'll say that ROAS is not one of them. Triple Whale is not one of them. Both of them are based on pixel-based attribution.
Okay.
And what that means is that, you're still counting on a pixel, but that pixel is still making the assumption that because somebody saw an ad, that's what drove the sale. When in reality, when you have 10 people that saw the ad, maybe 2 of them or 3 of them were going to buy anyway. They just happens to see the ad as they were scrolling on Instagram that day. So it really is very simple. It's very complex in the way it's built, but in terms of the output, it just essentially tells you from your source of truth, which could be your Shopify sales, your Amazon sales, retail sales, or all of the sales combined.
Right.
How much of that was contributed to by each channel and each campaign within each channel? And part of the secret sauce we have is that we talk to our clients to understand the campaign structure they use, so we can categorize things well. So as you might have heard, garbage in, garbage out. So the quality of the model is really important, but the quality of the data itself is really important. So, for example, for one of our clients, they're 100% focused on top of funnel awareness, and they're not really doing any retargeting. They're not interested in that. It's mostly a one purchase product. You don't really come back to buy this specific item. And the way they have it broken down is by the creative they use, whether or not they use models or the product itself,
Yep.
if they use video or if they use image. Then for others could be, within Performance Max. Within Performance Max, you have, video ads in Google, and you have, brand search, brand non-search, you have discovery, you have a number of different things,
Yep.
So it really comes down to what are the decisions that you as an advertiser need to make? Am I going to put my money on A, B, or C? Okay, what are A, B, and C? Let's define those. So that's a huge piece of machine learning, which is feature engineering, where we just figure out what are the things that we're going to feed the models so the output can be the most useful possible. So it really is, about, we're doing these 25 different things, and we have to find a way to understand how much each one contributes to the end goal. The way that I normally explain it is like, let's say that your car just died on the side of the road. You start pushing it, and you just give it all you have. You barely move it, and then somebody else, starts pushing. The car starts moving faster, and then a third person joins, and it starts moving faster. So with each person, you increase the speed of the car at which the car is moving. So there are a couple of things that go into that. The first one is the interaction effects. There's a certain amount of force that you apply when you're by yourself is different than the output that you get when it's like 2 people, or 10 people pushing the car.
That's right.
And then there's also the saturation effects and the time lag effects. So if you run an ad today, some of the people seeing the ad will buy today, but some people will buy next week or next month. So you really have to understand.
Or 6 months down the line.
Absolutely. And that's another problem with traditional tracking. Anything that happens outside the attribution window will be, started altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why when you look at platform reporting, you see that bottom of funnel channels tend to get a lot of credit, but bottom of funnel media is completely undervalued, because, you saw this, 30 days ago. Well, I had a 28-day attribution window. I don't care.
Yeah.
If they hadn't seen that ad,
they wouldn't have made a purchase. Yeah.
So it really comes down to like measuring this, So the way DataSpeaks works is it measures that for every geo market we have. So in the United States we have 50 states. In each state you have your sources are truth. You sell on Amazon in that state, Shopify on that state. We have a way to understand what your sales are for each state each day. And we also have a way to track how much you spend per channel and campaign per day. Right? Yeah. So over time, we see those patterns. So what DataSpeaks does is it gives you, and this is partially due to the suggestions you had for us, the feedback you provided. We're really honing in on making the recommendations very actionable. Not only where does your revenue come from, for every dollar you invest in ads, how many dollars of sales you get in return, but also what should you do? Where should you decrease your budget, increase your budget, move budget from A to B?
Yep.
In what outcome you're expected to get as you implement these recommendations.
And let me provide a real world example, because I think this stuff gets really complicated and confusing. So I think we have multiple clients with you guys actually. One of the cool things about DataSpeaks I think is great is they don't look at a single channel. So we're able to bring in everything from Klaviyo data to Amazon data, Criteo data, Facebook data, Google data, programmatic data. Literally, we have 6 different places we're buying media for this client. And what we realized was that one of our systems that was a remarketing heavy platform was getting a ton of credit in our reporting, because the platform was getting credit for, realistically, I would say at the time it's usually a 7 to a 10x ROAS. And typically we know that that's not last click. And we actually have the ability where we've taken the transaction ID from this channel and we've run it against the transaction IDs in Google Analytics. And we were actually able to see very clearly in Google Analytics, like Google Analytics showed us where the actual last click was. So, the last click email, last click brand, last click Facebook, but Criteo took credit for that sale as well, because it was served as part of the marketing channel within a certain time period of that user taking action. So Criteo, for example, served the ad, and within 7 days, within 24 hours, whatever the attribution model is, that person saw the ad, went and took action. When you look at the impact marketing, what you typically see is that consumer was likely to buy regardless of the remarketing aspect. The remarketing may have pushed them over the edge, but it didn't necessarily cause the impact, right? That wasn't the decision maker necessarily. It was just maybe, and that doesn't mean it doesn't have value, but it does mean that it's not necessarily a direct implication.
You're right about that. Like it's not binary, right? It's not like it worked or it didn't work. But out of the 10, going back to the example we talked about before, a certain channel is telling you that 50 people saw the ad, and therefore they got you 50 sales. In reality, they got you 20. So like 30 of those people were gonna buy anyway. So we know that there's a gap between what they're claiming and the reality. We just don't know how much it is. And sometimes because of the tracking issues we were talking about early in the call, sometimes they underreport. Same with the attribution windows being too short. Sometimes they overreport because everybody's claiming credit for the same sale, or just because somebody happened to scroll past one of my ads, hey, I got the sale. So I think that's a way to look at it, that out of all the sales a certain platform is claiming, one, they're missing others that for which they should be taking some credit for, but they're not, because they can. And for the ones that they're taking credit for, they don't always deserve the credit, So everything has usually everything has some impact. The real magic happens when you can understand to the dollar what that impact is.
So good example of that. So I was at a conference. We partnered with a company called Channable, and Channable was hosting a segment at this conference. And we learned a lot because Channable has this crazy Amazon tool to help streamline Amazon builds. And one of the keynote speakers from Amazon was talking about the data that they had done showed that a majority of their sales were being impacted from people on TikTok, the younger other generations, were on TikTok, find a product, and rather than buy it on TikTok, they would search for it on Amazon and make the purchase. Now, why is that a challenging thing to track? Well, TikTok is pixel-based. Amazon does not report sales back to your Shopify, assuming you have Shopify or WooCommerce. Shopify is your source of truth. Right. You're trying to track Shopify sales from TikTok or TikTok Shop also. But if you're trying to track it from TikTok and they look at TikTok and then go, screw that, I'm going to Amazon and buy it because I can get free shipping. Well, TikTok is not going to get credit for that. Amazon's going to take full credit. So you may go in and say, well, TikTok sucks. Man, this thing it's not working for me. And then you turn off TikTok and all of a sudden your Amazon sales drop. And you're like, what the hell happened? I didn't do anything. You turned off TikTok. And what you didn't realize as a buyer is that the influence was coming from TikTok, not Amazon. And because the data isn't connected, Amazon's a closed ecosystem, you had no way of seeing that there was an interaction between the two. So without the surveys that Amazon had done to understand this analogy, or without software like what Zeke software does, you would have no idea. Zeke, using that example, talk to me, and I did not prep you for this, so if you don't have an answer, perfectly okay, but how would you approach someone if they came to you and said, hey, we have TikTok and Amazon, we turned off our TikTok, and now our Amazon just went to crap. What happened? And how would your system help that? Or identify that?
We see this all the time. And it usually happens with double funnel channels like TikTok, YouTube, Meta, Instagram, where you are, as you mentioned earlier in the call, you generating that awareness, putting yourself in front of new consumers. And a lot of consumers, if you, for example, charge for shipping, they might just go to Amazon, or if they're an Amazon Prime customer, I'd rather get it overnight, for free instead of 2 days. So we have to understand that as brands and agencies, in some cases, we don't have control over where consumers purchase.
Correct.
And if you have a retail presence, people could go to Walmart and just get your product, right? So it really don't have a way to track individual customers. And there's a lot of effort that has been made by many technologies to try to track users like step by step.
Yep.
And you are really fighting against the machine. You're fighting against every Chrome extension, every browser setting. Users do not want to be tracked. So the way I see it is like, why, try to swim against the current. You really have to have it a way to really to track that is privacy friendly. So with data speaks, you don't need to track individual users. We use geolocation, so you could see, for example, what happened to your advertising in, say, Delaware and Colorado, and what happened to your sales on Amazon for those states. Because even though we can't see individual consumers, we are able to see where the orders are being placed and where they're being shipped. So we do have that geo data that we can feed into the models. So that's one point. And then another thing to take into consideration is that because everything is connected, every channel has an effect on another channel. So what might happen is that not only are you getting more sales on Amazon as you run as a Shopify, but you might have more demand for your brand keywords on Amazon, which then you're spending more on Amazon, right? So unless you have a way to track things, in a privacy-friendly way, you're gonna conclude that it's like those individual keywords that you're spending a little bit more on are driving all your sales. But, it really is all those consumers that you're targeting on a different channel.
And we had this happen with you as well, where we had a client where their PMAX campaigns were reporting a 7x. And when we pulled up the data in DataSpeaks, it was like a 2 or a 1 even. Like it was barely even like a double your money. Whereas Google's system was saying it was a 7x. And it's like, well, how the heck is that possible? And it's like, well, you have email, you have direct, you have all these other things that consumers are being impacted by. I don't know the exact situation, but like how do you usually approach that?
Yeah. So we have to understand, going back to this idea of correlation versus causation, that it's in the platform's best interest to show more ads to people who are purchasing. So if you are selling, let's say you sell chairs and you are, you have an email list of 10,000 subscribers, you have this 25% off sale, you email all of them. Google then sees that all these users are coming to your website. You have an audience of your retargeting users. So maybe yesterday they weren't showing your ads as much because people weren't engaging and they weren't buying, but now everybody's buying. So Google wants to show you ads and make you spend more on ads and take credit for those sales because they want to show a high performance. So they want to show up to the show where everybody's buying and for them to be more successful. They don't want to show up when there's one couple dining in the corner and the restaurant is empty. It's in the restaurant to show ads. So what happens is, and we see this in terms of when we do tracking by the minute. Usually you see sales go up first and then the spend goes up maybe an hour or two later. And once the algorithms kind of catch up with what's going on and people start reading, opening the emails in the morning. So you need to keep that in mind. Your platforms will use that to their own advantage. And, you can't really rely on their reporting is meant to make them look good. It's not meant to help you make decisions. So you really need to have an independent source of truth that you use to make your own decisions.
So we see this all the time with PMAX too, because like PMAX with B2B, what we typically see is we'll put it on, we'll set up an action, right? Like a lead form, and it'll say we got 30 lead forms. I literally had this happen on Facebook too, actually recently, but it was really both. It was PMAX and it was Facebook remarketing. And it said we had like 35 leads. I looked at Pipedrive with the client and the actual sources showed like maybe 20 that were coming in. Facebook was double reporting, if not like more. And the client's like, what the hell is this? And then Google, all the leads were just junk. It was bad emails. It was phone numbers. It was people who are likely to fill in a form, but not actually need the product. And so what we found is that a lot of times PMAX is a really detrimental service for businesses that use like for lead form type businesses, lead gen type businesses, B2B, because the quality is so bad that it just completely screws up the numbers and screws up the data. And even if you try to limit to, no free emails, you still get a bunch of junk that comes in because that's what Google is incentivizing. Google's incentivized to get you as much volume as possible, regardless if it's good or not. So yeah, we've seen that time and time again. That's why Google has been sued so many times for trying to push display network on people in ways that are hidden in the settings. And they've had lawsuits back to back. You tried to stuff display on people without them knowing. And now they're like, well, we're just going to go ahead and do PMAX and smart campaigns and stuff all our services on you. And you have no choice because we're not going to show you where we're showing it. We're the black box. Just trust us. And so, in a world of just trust us, be a data speaks, right?
Yeah. I think that it's, we're just so used to going to the platforms for like what they think our performance was, that we really sometimes, forget to question. But at the end of the day, what really matters is how much money was in the bank at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Your e-commerce is your source of truth. And, you can do that with your own data. You can just like add what all the platforms are claiming. It's never going to add up to the total that you actually got,
Yep.
If you use last click attribution, which is what Google Analytics uses, then you'll see, essentially what's the last thing people did before purchasing. But, it's not really showing what got you the customer in the first place. So, yes, I mean, it's, I think it's important to understand when to use which tools, and part of this is I don't want to say that ROAS data is useless. It's useful in the context of, for example, if you have 3 different campaigns within Facebook, it would help you understand which one is doing better. The video one, Advantage Plus, the catalog campaign, retargeting campaign. It can help you to understand what's happening within a channel, but it's never going to help you understand what's happening in the big context, because any platform can only see what consumers do on that platform, and they're like totally oblivious to the actual reality of your business and how those same consumers interact with other ads on other platforms.
Yeah. So how do you guys compare your services to things like Google Floodlight tags, where Google Floodlight is one tag that you use across multiple platforms so that Google can dedupe the conversions, like Microsoft versus Google. It can dedupe conversions, and it can also try to use a multi-platform impact to optimize towards one source of truth. Have you guys dealt with kind of comparisons to Floodlight tags? Is that something you guys had a lot of conversations?
No, I have not read about it.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so I think that there are 2 main functions. One is tracking real impact. So you have 10 potential investments on the table, some things you're doing, some things you might be doing, understanding, if I put $1 here, I'm going to get this many dollars back. If I put $1 here, I'm going to get this many dollars back. That's the one thing that I consider the most important one as a marketer. That's 80% of most companies' marketing budgets advertising.
Yeah.
So it's really important to get that piece right. The other piece is the ability to make those campaigns more efficient by streaming that information back to the platforms. Essentially, with the migration from third-party cookies to first-party cookies, as you said, it's your job to collect all this information and then stream it to the different platforms and letting them know what they were able to track on their own in the past.
Yep.
So it seems from the way you're describing the solution that it would help you to do the second one. So if that's what it does, it's probably helpful.
Yeah, it's definitely the more premium. Like the average user is not going to use a Floodlight tag. That's really a lot of media buyers, a lot of Google, like Search 360, GA 360. Like most of the services, like Google Analytics 360 is like a $12,000 a month Google Analytics tool. So they're going to have a very different program right, than you would get typically going through Google ads or Google Analytics, right? Because you're paying for the premium, I think it's about $150,000 minimum to get in there, which is fascinating. So for Data Speaks, what I want people to know from my standpoint is the benefit that we have worked with you on is when it comes to budgeting, right? Like we've brought to you a client who, has $100,000 in spend, and we're spending, 25,000 on different services. And you come in and say, hey, your services are showing that if you invest this here, you're going to likely see a better return than if you invested the same dollars over here. And we had that directly with you where it was like, hey guys, this is what you're spending money on, but this is the secret weapon that's going to actually help you scale. If you put $2,000 into this service like Facebook, that's actually going to have a much better return than that same $2,000 into PMAX. And we had that conversation multiple times. It's like the budgeting element of what your services do. It's like, don't just randomly trust the platforms. What realistically is the best place to invest your dollars, where if you invest $1,000, you're going to see an extra $2,000 back or an extra $3,000 back, depending on ROAS. How do you guys approach your budgeting survey, your budget recommendations? And how do you typically advise people to take action on those budget recommendations?
Yeah, we say two things. You need to make gradual changes, which usually we say don't go over like 5% increase or decrease for any one platform in any kind of campaign type. So do things slowly. Essentially allow the platforms to absorb the new budget. And then the other thing is be consistent. So don't grow it like crazy and then bring it down like crazy. Like just do it slowly and methodically. And usually we say this would vary depending on the volume of ads you run, but for most brands, you don't need to do this more than once a month. So it's an assessment that we do once a month. We give recommendations, and what Data Speaks does is not only does it give you the recommendations, but as let's say out of 10 recommendations, you act on 8 of them. So you can actually track all those 8. And then you see the expected outcome versus the actual outcome that you get, and the algorithm learns from that, So maybe he was expecting a ROAS of 4, and it's getting a ROAS of like 3.9, right? So just that, and you get bigger recommendations because a lot changes, we talk about the saturation effects. The economy is changing around COVID, that things went crazy, so there's really a lot that models need to be very, very good these days at taking in new data in real time and adjusting their beliefs and recommendations, and let you know when, like, one of the things that happens is we actually had this happen like this week, when there was one recommendation for an increase in budget, and I think he said like 5% week over week. The client was, increasing it 15% week over week, and the recommendation went from scale up to slow down. Because the algorithm wasn't able to capture all that. They were actually losing money. Maybe getting 80 cents back for every dollar they were investing because they were doing it so fast. So yeah, I mean, look at the data. That's my advice. Like you really, if you're investing, 5 or 10 grand a month, maybe you can get away with, something very basic like triple whale. If you're investing, 10 times that, you should get serious about something that can actually track where your sales come from. And yeah, like, you don't want to touch things too much. It's kind of like do your thing, let it.
Buddy,
good results, and then
say that for the people louder in the back, right? Say it louder for the people in the back, I should say. That's such an unknown. Like people don't realize how important that is.
Yeah, we have a one client in particular that tends to panic. So like he. Says, okay, we're gonna do this, and then like 3 days later, like we say, like this is gonna take a couple of weeks to pay off. Sure enough, 3 days later, he freaks out. That is very damaging. So because you're throwing money, the way I usually describe it, is like if you had to like water a plant for 60 days for the the plant to come out of the soil. If you give up after like 30 days, it's not going to come out. Like you have to like really, if you're going to do 30 days, then
Yeah.
don't do it.
Or if you drowned it with 60 days worth of water on day 3.
Absolutely, that's the other one, right? Like it's
Yeah.
it's just you really have to understand that these things have a way of evolving, and algorithms get increasingly more effective as they ingest more data. So you really have to.
What do you usually tell people in that situation where you get kind of the alarmist, client that comes to you and every decision is make or break? Do you usually have recommendations for how you approach it? Do you tell them to lower their budget so they have to be less reactive? Is it, they're maybe taking too many risks if they're being that reactive? Like, how do you typically approach that? Because that is such a common thing where, if you're investing $100,000-$200,000 and you're not seeing exactly what you expect within day 1 or day 2, you're freaking out. And meanwhile, Google's saying, we're not even done looking at this yet. We still got 7 more days of analysis. What are you talking about?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, and I think that's where really fantastic analysts get to shine. Understanding the patterns. So one example is, like I had a client that was looking at month-to-date data on the 5th of the month, and she was saying that at that rate they were never going to reach for the month. Well, 2 of those 5 days were weekend days, and weekend days for them were really slow, so they weren't taking that into consideration.
Right. Or
Another
holidays.
thing, it's like if like half of the days in the month are low sales, that's going to bring your average down.
Yep.
Things will even out over time. The other thing to understand is that there are certain patterns. Your sales don't exceed the previous day's sales every day. There's like ups and downs. I think that taking into account seasonality is really important. Looking at the day of the week is really important. I think the other thing is, if you do sales, you're during the period where you have a promotion, your sales will go up, but then after that, they're going to go down lower than usual because all those people that were going to buy around the time bought during the sale. So there's a lot of, we built something that essentially you can click on any metric and it will show you, what changed, what channels, what devices. So, to make it super easy. But I think one of the things that I say is, this person looks at things day by day. So we agreed that we would talk once a week, just to give things time, so maybe Tuesday sucked, but Wednesday was great, so there was no need to change the strategy on Tuesday, like that's just part of how it goes. I think it's a lot of getting them off a ledge sometimes, and understanding that there are a lot of things that come into play, and just because you had a slow day doesn't mean that your strategy needs to be changed.
So if we're wrapping up here, we're getting close to an hour and 18 minutes here on this podcast. If you're still sticking around, thank you. We appreciate it. Hopefully you've learned a lot from this, because I know this is some great information. And every time my team talks with Zeke, they always just have their head just spinning. So talk to us real quick, as we wrap up, who should be contacting a data speaks? Like, what is the ideal client for you guys? Is it B2B? Do you do anything with kind of the service industries? Do you just do like e-commerce? Does there have to be revenue involved? Talk to me about who the ICP is for you guys.
Yeah. Most of our clients are consumer brands that do between 10 and 100 million a year. We do work with a few companies that are outside that range and some B2B. The reason why we work primarily with those clients is usually if you are just getting started, maybe you have $1 million of sales, you might not need this level of sophistication. You might not be investing enough in ads to justify the solution with ROAS. And usually if you have, say, if you're like, I don't know, Walmart, you have your own team of data scientists, you can build this for yourself. It's probably as good as what we have. It's just going to cost you a couple million a year to just maintain.
Just a couple.
Yeah. It's going to cost you. Like, if you want to build something like what we build, it's going to be a couple $1 million plus, staff and you had to maintain servers and all that. So at some point that makes sense, right? Like if you are that big, by all means to build it yourself.
Because you're a team of data scientists, machine learning algorithms. You're looking at multiple platforms of data. You're analyzing trends. Like this isn't just a pixel. This isn't just like something you purchase and put on a site like a Hyros. You guys actually have a full data science division that creates these models. So I want to make sure that people understand, because we get pretty high level, I think, on these conversations, and I think it's sometimes hard for people just to understand at brass tacks. What am I paying you for? It's analysis. It's full data science, right? It's full on understanding the data models, understanding why people are buying, what people are buying, what's making them buy, and how to influence those models. And data science as a division is typically very expensive. If you try to hire a data science, you're not going to hire a data scientist for your team for under 150K. Like that is not going to happen. Like you're going to be paying a lot for a data scientist. So what you get from using a team like DataSpeaks is a team of data scientists worth of quality that you're not paying anywhere near 150K a year for.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we essentially we want to give the small guys the ability to outsmart the big guys, you know, and like level the playing field where the one that is going to win the customers out there is not necessarily the one with the biggest pockets, but the one with the best insights.
Exactly.
That's really our mission. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, if you are still on, if you want to check out what Zeke and I are talking about, check out DataSpeaks, dataspeaks.io, right? Correct?
AI.
Dataspeaks.ai, folks. Dataspeaks.ai. And for me, Bryan Butler, I am with SmarTech. We are smarttech.company with one T, SMART. And we are here to service you guys when it comes to marketing technology and marketing needs, Google Tag Manager, tracking analytics. So if you have questions, let us know. We're here to answer those questions for you and to help make sure that you guys don't fall victims to the cookie apocalypse that will be on our way summer 2024. So Zeke, this has been wonderful. Thank you for your time. If anybody has any questions, they can get a hold of either of us. But other than that, you guys have a great day.
Thank you, Bryan.